Check, check. Welcome, everyone. My name is Cindy Rowe, and I am the chair of the Brookline Democratic Town Committee. The committee is the local organization of the Massachusetts Democratic Party, and we make sure that our Brookline residents can engage with local officials, participate with ballot campaigns that are supported by the state party, and learn about public policy issues. Tonight, we are holding our legislative roundtable, the first meeting we are having in person in 3 years. We will be discussing issues of concern to Brookline voters. Thanks to those of you who sent in your questions ahead of time. We will collect questions from people in the room also. You'll see file cards being passed out if you want to submit a question. While we may not get to all of them during this event, and there are many, many questions, I hope that the questions will allow the candidates to touch on many areas of interest to you. Our thanks to the staff at Brookline Interactive Group for making this evening possible. The content of the following program is solely the responsibility of the producer, the Brookline Democratic Town Committee. All Brookline residents are welcome to use BIG's resources as members. Visit brooklineinteractive.org to learn more and to support BIG. My thanks also to my Brookline Democratic Vice Chair, Jim Franco, and our Treasurer, Tom Halleck, for helping to put this night together. The format of our roundtable tonight will be to allow each elected official to have 5 minutes as for an opening statement. We have asked them that during this opening, they give us their top 3 legislative priorities. We will then share some questions with them, and we'll try to cover as many topics as we can. We'll start each question with a different elected official and then ask the others to comment if they have anything to add. Each person will be asked to keep their remarks to a 2-minute response. If we have time and there are more questions, we'll do a lightning round at the end so that we can try to raise even more issues in our limited amount of time. We expect this section of our evening to last from now until 8:30. At 8:30, we'll thank our elected officials and then invite up the 3 people who wish to become an elected official of the town of Brookline by winning the primary for the state rep race, which includes precinct 16. We expect this section to end by 9 p.m. One note for those of you in the 10th Suffolk District, which is precinct 16, at the polls on May 2nd, you will get 2 ballots, one for the town election and a separate one for the state rep race. If you are voting by mail, you will get 2 mail-in ballots, each with its own return envelope. We'll have some more details about the ways to vote at the end of this evening, but you can always go to brooklinema.gov/town-clerk for a full explanation of voting options. So now we turn to our elected officials, and we will start with their openings. So this is the opening, including your top 3 priorities, and we will start with our state senator, Cynthia Cream.
Thank you, Cindy. Thank you for inviting me to discuss my work in the Senate, and I'm amazingly happy to be somewhere after 3 years of looking at everyone in the square. So thank you. This session, I was reappointed as Senate Majority Leader by Senate President Karen Spilka. And I'm honored to continue in that role. It offers me a unique opportunity to help set the Senate's agenda and advance priorities like climate change, gun violence, and reforming the state's prison. I was also recently reappointed as chair of the Senate Committee on Global Warming and Climate Change. With me is the policy director, Garrett Casey, who also runs that committee. It's a great opportunity, and we have great hearings. We're going to continue our hearings and hope to help Massachusetts achieve transition to clean heating and cooling. And I will also be exploring other topics like reducing emissions from building, concrete, and steel. In January, I filed dozens of bills on topics ranging from climate change, reproductive health, and criminal justice. I'm excited to go to work and advance these bills, and I will quickly, it's very hard to pick three, so I'm picking three, but that doesn't mean that I don't love all the other bills. So the first bill is an act relative to the future of clean heat in this Commonwealth. This is our goal of this is to create a pilot project in the Mass Clean Energy Center, which through Massachusetts would purchase, we would be able to quickly, that we would transition rapidly to other forms of thermal energy like network geothermal, air source heat pumps, recently put in a heat pump. We've got to move along, and this bill, I hope, is going to lead the way to get rid of fossil fuels. The next, I'm rushing because I don't want to take up all the time here, but the next bill, you may see this lovely red bracelet that I'm wearing. It says Moms Demand Action. Today, I kicked off that project at the State House, and we hope that in Massachusetts, we can even do better. We're not number one, and we always were number one. So I did file several gun bills. The one I wanted to just talk about was an act relative to ghost guns. It's amazing that you can get and buy and make pieces of guns, put them together, not register them, and they're not illegal. I hope we take action. I'm assuming that we'll do something, and my aim is to ban ghost guns. The third bill, again, not just my only bills, is an act protecting reproductive health access, LGBTQ lives, religious liberty, and freedom of movement by banning the sale of cell phone location information. Now, we might not realize, I'm just going to give you a quick example. The information that you obtain from your cell phones can be sold to third parties. It was done, and information relative to women in a state where abortion service, reproductive health services were banned. The information on her cell phone was followed. It was purchased by an independent third party. And through that independent third party, they found that she had been seeking healthcare, reproductive rights in a state that allowed it. It was legal. Massachusetts is one of those states, but it is illegal in her state to have done that. Through that cell phone location, they were able to again bring an action against her when she went back to her state. She had no idea. My aim is to not let this happen when you don't give permission and you don't have any ideas. I'm happy at another time to talk about all my thousands of bills, but thank you so much, Cindy, for having me tonight.
Thank you. Next, we have Representative Balzer.
Hi, thanks. It's really a pleasure to be here, to be back in Brookline. I say back because when I was first elected to the legislature, all the way back in 1998, the district I represented included precinct 15 of Brookline. And then due to redistricting for 20 years, I represented a district that was only Newton. And now, having lived through my third redistricting, I am back now representing parts of precincts 5, part of precinct 13, 14, and 15. So here I am, and it's great to be with my friends in Brookline. So Cindy suggested that we talk about 3 priorities, and I'm choosing to describe the priorities as topics rather than individual bills, because within each topic, I've got a whole bunch of bills, but I'm not going to go into all those details. I am by profession a clinical psychologist. And so for all the years that I've been in the legislature, I have drawn on that and focused on mental health public policy, working to increase access to mental health and addiction services. As the years have gone on, that has led me to be involved with criminal justice reform, because sadly, so many people who suffer from these illnesses land in the criminal justice system. So a top priority for me within that whole area of what I call decriminalizing mental illness and addiction is reforming our Section 35 program. Section 35 is a law in Massachusetts that allows a court to send someone who's at serious risk of harm to themselves or others because of a serious addiction. They can be sent to involuntary treatment. Massachusetts stands alone in the entire country as allowing those programs to happen in jail. And so we are incarcerating men, because we've prohibited doing it to women, who are sick and need treatment. And my bill would prohibit sending those folks to prison and would require the state to establish healthcare facilities for them. Another top priority has to do with libraries. I have a bill that would empower library access to electronic books and digital audiobooks, because the big bad companies like Amazon charge libraries a whole lot more than they charge an individual person to get access to digital audiobooks and ebooks. And it's become a huge problem in terms of public access to this reading material. And I've been working with the Massachusetts Library Association and have legislation that's being talked about actually across the country, where there are other attempts to make sure that libraries get to fulfill their mission, which is to make sure that reading material is available to all. And finally, I have quite a few bills sticking to the idea of a topic relating to reforming and improving our nursing homes. During COVID, I was the House Chair of the Joint Committee on Elder Affairs. That was literally an awesome responsibility because of what was the tragedy that was unfolding everywhere, but especially in our nursing homes. And I think that we can't just say goodbye to this pandemic without at least trying to learn to prevent future tragedies. And so I have a number of bills that would improve conditions in nursing homes, including moving towards single room occupancy rather than large spaces, making sure there are infection control procedures in place. And related to that, I have a bill that would make it a state day of recognition to remember COVID-19 and to remember those we lost, especially older adults. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. And next is Representative Kevin Honan.
Thank you very much, Cindy. It's a pleasure for me to be here. I represent Alston, Brighton, and Brookline. I have precinct 13 and part of 14. And it's my honor to be here. When I was first elected, the governor and the lieutenant governor were both from Brookline. I think now we have the treasurer. So Michael Dukakis and Evelyn Murphy, both Brookline, and Eleanor Meyerson had 3 precincts in Brighton. She came through Brookline, Roslindale, and a couple of precincts in Alston, Brighton. Then Mark Drazen won that seat, and they all had the pleasure of serving with John Bussinger, who was my chair at the time when I was first elected of the Committee on Election Laws. So it's nice to see John here, who I've kept in touch with all those years. So I chair a steering, policy, and scheduling, but I'm more known in the legislature for my work on housing. I was the chair of the Housing Committee for 17 years. And in that capacity, traveled all around the state studying housing issues from Holyoke, Pittsfield, down to the Cape, Taunton, Fall River, New Bedford. So housing was my area of strength, and it still is. We have a tremendous housing crisis here in Massachusetts. People just can't afford to live here. So I've worked a lot on that. I recently had my meeting, as we all do, with the chair of Ways and Means. The issues that I was promoting during the budget would be more money for Boys and Girls Clubs, for the Mass Alliance of Boys and Girls Club. I've sponsored that for 18 years, where we add about 2 million each year with the help of my colleagues here. Boys and Girls Club programs do a lot in the area of academics as well. Operation ABLE, which is a program for mature workers, helping them learn skills for the newer economy. Worked on affordable green housing across the state, money for artists, and food pantry for our area. And we have a school called Boston Green Academy. It's a vocational ed. We have 2 vocational eds in Boston. And this one is catered towards the green economy, teaching youth about sustainable energy and other things. So in terms of my priorities, I didn't narrow it down to specific bills. I narrowed it down, Cindy, to areas. So housing, again, would be the top priority. We will be doing a bond bill at some point this session. The last one we did, I sponsored, which was 1.8 billion with 600 million for housing authorities. You have a wonderful housing authority and executive director here in Brookline. Your director is cutting edge and has been helpful to me in the past. And money for the operating subsidy of public housing is something that we'll all champion up here. I put through, with the help of my colleagues, an eviction moratorium and a foreclosure moratorium during COVID. We all worked hard for more money for RAFT and MRVP to protect tenancies. So there wasn't a tsunami of evictions, but we're worried about that now. Other issues, as the senator mentioned, we're all active on climate change, green energy, and our friend Tommy here is such a champion on those issues. So we will all work with Tommy on environmental issues, particularly as it pertains to housing, public housing, state buildings and the like, electric vehicles. In addition, in the area of education, I've visited your high school. I visited the Lincoln School and am so impressed with the lunch programs that you have and the nutrition programs. Obviously, we need to make sure youth are well-fed and prepared to learn. Met with your school superintendent. The other major issue I'm concerned about is work that Ruth has done in the area of mental health for young people. And I have a daughter, it's 24, so I've learned through personal issues with her friends and her and all of the anxiety and stress that young people deal with. So I'll continue to file legislation and co-sponsor legislation that Ruth will be leading on and working with the entire Brookline delegation to try to help the young people of our area and of our Commonwealth. And when I was talking to you about the environment issues and housing, I used to work for ABCD, Action for Boston Community Development, and my first job out of college. And Brookline was one of my areas where you would, if you were eligible for fuel assistance, and there are some people in Brookline that are eligible for fuel assistance, just like Newton. Newton was also my area. And we would show people how to weatherize their windows and doors,
So
replace oil burners and heating systems.
we'll be getting back to a number of those issues, but I saw my timekeeper
Thank you.
give me the nudge.
Anyway, it's a
Sorry.
pleasure to be here.
We hope it remains a pleasure to be here. Representative Vitolo.
Well, hello, and it's so nice to see so many people I haven't seen in quite some time, as well as folks I have the pleasure of seeing more often. I am Tommy Vitolo. I represent North Brookline nominally, but in practice, anyone in Brookline is free to contact me, and I'll partner with my Brookline colleagues to make sure that we're taking care of everyone in town. I just started my third term. I made my way through a successful primary last year. I serve as the vice chair of election laws. Another shout out to John Bussinger. I also serve on steering and policy under this chair, and I serve on elder affairs, which I served on under this chair. I also serve on tourism, arts, and cultural development. Locally, recently, I've been quite active on two different issues. One is the Yes for Brookline campaign. I am adamantly pro question 1 and question 2. I think they're critically important to our municipality. We need a new peer school, and we need to have the resources to pay our staff. And I will continue talking about that. I also have been working very hard on getting our community and the state to figure out the MBTA Communities Act as it applies to Brookline. I want us to get to yes, and I want us to do it the right way. It's not clear that the MBTA Communities Act guidelines are appropriate for our community. So I'm working to try to bend those guidelines and also working with our town to try to get us there. I don't know what town meeting will ultimately do in November. I don't know what our choices are going to be. What I do know is Brookline needs to be part of the process of creating more housing in the Boston metro area. And we also need to preserve the things in Brookline that make it such a wonderful place to live. We can do both. We must do both. And that will be an ongoing conversation, at least for the next 9 months, if not more. My priorities are always social and economic justice, public education, and climate. With respect to social and economic justice, there's so many great bills kicking around. I met today with some advocates from MIRA, which is an advocacy group focused on taking care of immigrants. Really important work, and we have work to do. We made progress last session by ensuring that everyone had access to driver's licenses if they paid the fees and passed the tests and did all the other things we love to do at the RMV, but there's more work to be done there. Today, I also met with Mothers Out Front advocates from Brookline, and we talked about a bill I have to keep guns out of sensitive areas like schools and government buildings. But there's loads of bills. We've got to get something done with respect to firearm safety this session. I don't know what it's going to be. There's a lot of bills in play. I suspect we'll try to cobble some together. And with respect to public education, hey, we've got the Fair Share Amendment passed into law. We've got to divide that up between transportation and education. And then in education, we've got to divide that up between higher ed, K through 12, and early ed. And when you start dividing and dividing and dividing, you find it's not all that much money left for each of these areas. And we've got to figure out how to use that money to not only raise all boats, but pay particular attention in the areas where more investment will have the biggest return for our Commonwealth, whether or not that happens to be the 15th Norfolk District. For environment and climate, my focus tends to be buildings. I know an awful lot about power plants, and we're making great progress there. I think a lot about transportation, and we have a clear path for electric vehicles. Buildings are hard, right? There's something like 4 million buildings in Massachusetts, and we need to decarbonize every single one of them. That's going to take some real work from the legislature, and I'm on board. I've also been focused on some state local issues like hybrid town meeting, hybrid boards, committees, and commission meetings, and home rules related to climate and government operations and so forth. I also want to say how excited I am to work with 2 state reps who are relatively new to Brookline, maybe from decades ago, but combined have 60 years of experience in the House. These folks are giants. And now they're giants who help work for Brookline directly. And that is amazing when combined with the giant to my right, Senator Cindy Cream. And so for another couple of months, I'm the junior rep, but pretty soon, we'll have a new rep representing precinct 16. That election is May 2nd, the same day as the town election. The Democratic primary, May 2nd in precinct 16. So I hope you'll get out and vote for that. That's it. More to come.
Okay, well, interestingly enough, all of you hit something in each of these questions that have been given to us.
That's great. So
So-
it sounds like we're done.
Well, we're going to go more into depth into some of them. And we'll start in sort of reverse order here, but and you all have the opportunity to comment if you want, but if you addressed it in your opening remarks, you can also feel free to say, I already talked about that, so we can move on and then we'll get more questions in. So I leave it up to you. So for this first question here, we're going to start with Representative Balzer. And let's go back to reproductive rights. So reproductive rights are under attack in our country now. Here in Massachusetts, after the Dobbs decision, we strengthened our laws to protect providers and out-of-state patients who come into our state for abortion care. Are there further ways we can act to protect reproductive rights?
I'm looking for my bill number. So first of all, it's really worth repeating what you said in the question, which is how much we've done already. Within days of learning of the death of the late great Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, we that session passed legislation that would make sure that women would not lose access to abortion because we knew what was coming once she was gone. And then in the following session, as soon as Dobbs happened, we passed legislation that would protect women from out of our state to come here and protect our providers to make sure that they could provide reproductive health care to those women. What I'm looking for is a bill that I filed. Oh, you know what? It's not on this on this list, which has to do with insurance coverage for full spectrum pregnancy care. And so that's a piece we can still do. And I assume that says I should stop. Oh, okay. No, I'm done. My eyesight isn't so great, so those signs aren't working, but okay.
Our next, and again, if you want to comment on it, Representative Honan will be our next.
Thank you.
Speaker.
Planned Parenthood on Comm Ave is in my district, so I work closely with them. I believe they have a legislative agenda of about 4 issues, which I've co-sponsored all 4 of them that I believe everyone on the panel has. So we're in close communication with Planned Parenthood. We, over the years, it's new to Brookline here, Liam Lowney, who was Shannon's brother, he worked in my office, did an internship in my office. So these issues are near and dear to me, protecting a woman's right to choose, and look forward to working again with all my colleagues here, protecting all the rights of women, regardless of economic status, to have access to healthcare.
Representative Fatolo.
Sure. But before I answer the question, I do want to put in a plug. April 1st is a fundraising event for Brookline Interactive Group. It's going to be a great night. Go to brooklineinteractive.org, check it out, maybe buy a ticket. I'll be there, and I hope you'll be there too. With respect to reproductive rights, I was actually at an event last night with Reproductive Equity Now, and we talked about some of the issues. We talked primarily about access. And so it's one thing to say a thing is legal. It's another thing to make sure that all of the people who need that thing have access. And so as Chair Balzer mentioned, insurance and money is part of that, making sure that it's covered, because if you can't pay for it, it's not a right of yours, right? But it's also about making sure that you have access if you're on a college campus, making sure you have access at the pharmacy, and that the pharmacies are actually giving out the medications necessary. And finally, of course, there's the evolving federal landscape. And I am sure that everything that we know to be legal and guaranteed about abortion right now is not likely to be true 18 months from now, right? We're struggling through a Supreme Court where, 1/3 of the members were appointed by President Trump, and 4 members, I guess, and one picked off from what should have been a President Obama appointment. And so some of it is going to be responsive or in defense to what happens at the federal level or in federal courts across the country. And so the good news is both Planned Parenthood and Reproductive Equity Now have great teams and have great relationships in the State House, and they will make sure that we know the right issues to focus on and that we are well educated on them.
Senator Cream.
I did mention one thing, but I just want to quickly mention 2 other issues that I'm interested in. One is the issue with misleading crisis pregnancy centers, the issue of whether women end up going to where they think they're going to get services or where they're going to be talked out of services. And the other is a telehealth bill, which would improve access to reproductive health care. And lastly, the Health Youth Act for appropriate sex education. So all of those are equally important.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I also got a reminder here to tell you to lean into your microphones so that people can hear, both here and online. Okay, next question coming up, we start with Representative Honan. The T is in crisis. So, having just waited for a half hour for a red line train yesterday, I can personally attest to the fact that the T is in crisis. This makes us realize how critical transportation is to our economy and keeping cars off the road, and how fragile our transportation system is. So talk to us about the role of public transportation in our state and what we can do to improve its reliability.
Well, my district is very reliant on the T, and it's always an issue for us. We receive nothing but complaints about every facet of the T, including the ride for our seniors. So it's in very rough shape. And again, every facet of it is a problem, but the governor has recently hired a new director who would seem to be eminently qualified for this job. So we're counting on that. And I know that one of the main issues when it was brought up in the paper with Governor Dukakis and John is the north-south rail link. And that's, part of the issue. But the other issue that we hear quite a bit about is not enough in drivers and employees. So it's obviously a sustainable, environmentally sound way to go to work. So I do have legislation that I filed with many members of the Boston delegation to have our vocational education program at Madison Park train people to be drivers. But as far as the nitty gritty of it, the quality of the trains, the quality of the track, the timing, the starting, there's just so many issues that are going to have to be handled by the new executive director. If I could handle that and answer those questions, I would be making $450,000 a year with working for the MBTA. So it's a wonderful question. And I know so many of our constituents are dependent on it. And I know the quality of it has been very, very poor. So we continue to make phone calls, and the quality, it's not just the train's not running on time. It's the squeaky train tracks that a problem for some people along Comm Ave anyway.
Thank
Baker
you.
Street. Thank you for the question. So there's an enormous amount of work that needs to be done there. I guess money would be one of them. And Tommy mentioned the vote there for funding. So hopefully money for schools, money for transit, and hopefully a lot of that money would help.
Speaking of Tommy, Representative Vitola, the question to you.
As many folks in this room know, my family does not own a car, and we rely on the T as well as our feet and our bicycles to get around. Today, I bicycled to the State House yesterday. I rode the Green Line. The weather wasn't so great in the morning. And so it's an issue that I feel personally nearly every day. My wife also, of course, takes the T when she goes to work downtown. I met with GM Ng earlier this week, and we share a degrees in engineering and a love of transit. And we're also both New York Mets fans, for what that's worth. Yeah, he's got a tough job ahead. When Governor Baker 8 years ago told the legislature he wanted control of the T, the legislature said, "You want it, you got it, buddy." And in those 8 years, a man who was elected on his managerial expertise did a reasonably good job investing in capital. But at the same time, he starved the operating side. The T is down hundreds and hundreds of employees. We don't have enough dispatchers. We don't have enough safety inspectors. We don't have enough operators, right? You can't run the system if you don't have the employees. And in an effort to cut costs, he simply let positions go unfilled, to the point that the federal government came in and told Boston, you cannot operate the T as many vehicles as you'd like because you cannot safely do it. You've been doing it unsafely. And that was not that long ago. It was a few weeks or months ago. We're trying to hire, and I'm hopeful that Governor Healy and GM Ng will be successful in ramping up the staffing, which is critical to running the T. Without the staffing, we simply can't get it done.
And next, Senator Cream.
Well, I know what I know, and I know what I don't know, and I don't know how to fix the T. I will say that all three of my communities, Brookline, Newton, and Wellesley, depend on the T or commuter rail. And we're just worried about what's going to happen. I have been a little bit involved in trying to electrify buses and electrify the commuter rail. That probably is a great idea and costs more money, but I am intent on trying to do that. I've also have hearings on the climate resilience of transportation and whether the MBTA will withstand rising seas and bigger storms. All of that are more problems to the people that are trying to solve them. And then there's a question of taking safety monitoring away from the Department of Public Utilities and giving it into an entity that's better equipped to do it. So I've only raised more problems, but have no answers. I leave that to to the new governor and to Mr. Eng to try and solve the problem. Thank you.
And Representative Balzer.
Thank you. Well, I certainly agree that this is absolutely top priority for the state right now. It's just unbelievable crisis that RT is in, the safety, the reliability, are just awful. So I'm very excited about this new general manager. I haven't met him yet, but what I've read about him is he really, he has a track record of, so to speak, of improving performance on the Long Island Railroad, and seems, I'm impressed with Governor Healy for having made a nationwide search and seems to have come up with a really terrific choice. He seems to understand the problems, and I think that's great. I would also mention that our colleague in the House Chair of Transportation, has put forward an idea, some new legislation about moving the commuter rail out of the T and putting it into the state system. He identifies that one of the problems that the T has faced has been the fact that it has too much on its plate, and more than other public transit systems in other states, and thinks that perhaps shifting the responsibility to the state on the commuter rail might help. And then I just want to mention again that all of us were supporters of the Fair Share Amendment, and the Fair Share Amendment, one of the main purposes was to make sure we had enough money for transportation. And so that will bring us some needed funds, as well as the good management that this new leadership should bring.
The next question, we will start with Representative Vitolo, and we're switching topics here. There seems to be a lot of focus on kids this session. Funding is moving along to continue universal free lunch programs. The governor has recommended investing hundreds of millions in affordable and quality early childhood care. What do you think we can do to make Massachusetts a more nurturing place for our kids?
Well, the good news is we start from a great place. Things are expensive in Massachusetts, but they're awfully high quality too. And so that means that folks with access do have access to great opportunities. We're absolutely going to get the universal lunch. It's breakfast and lunch, in fact, for all kids. And that's critically important, because it's not always the case that the kids who need free lunch in November even needed it in September, right? The realities of so many families is that their needs shift dramatically, sometimes even on a month-to-month basis. And making sure that we're taking care of every kid means not loading up the bureaucracy, but simply, giving kids lunch. It's not complicated. I don't know what we're going to do yet with early childhood care. Certainly, it's part of the conversation about some of the fair share revenue. And, we in Massachusetts don't even have full day kindergarten across the Commonwealth, right? So we have work to do there. I'd love to see that expanded, not just for kindergarten for everyone, but we really need to get a year ahead of that, right? We know that the value of early ed multiplies out through the years, that it's an incredibly positive investment. And if we care about workforce 15 years from now, we need to care about early ed today. Hopefully by then they'll have better housing opportunities. It's early in the session, and we're just back in the building. And so I don't know exactly what we're going to get done, what's going to get hot, where we're going to find the votes. There's definitely interest in taking care of the youngest amongst us, and exactly where that shows up yet, I'm not sure.
And next is Senator Cream.
Thank you. So with regard to, just on a quick thing, with regard to our young people, we have to put more money into childcare because our young people will be in a better place if they have adequate and proper childcare and if their parents have childcare funds. So that sort of goes without saying. So I also have a bill on social and emotional learning, requiring, particularly in the area of sports teams, that there's a program set up that they understand the issues of harassment and that they understand how to deal with those issues and that they understand that they can't bully. And I think that's an important thing. We saw a great deal of anti-Semitism in the Duxbury school system. And I hope as a result of that, I filed this bill on social and emotional learning in the area of sports. So that's one thing. I'm also very involved with juvenile justice and emerging adult legislation. I think we need to look at our young people, see what we can do for them, have expungement of their juvenile and youth adult records, and give them alternatives so that they're not on the street and getting in trouble.
Okay. Sorry, we started with you on this question, right?
Oh,
We started with Representative Tola on that question. Sorry, now Representative Balzer.
That's all right. I forgot the question. You forgot.
We're going around the circle, around and around. This was the question about kids and what we can do for our kids.
Perfect match. Okay, so as far as a few things, one is that the legislature just passed a supplemental budget that included money for 130 million for SNAP food assistance benefits, and also 65 million to continue free school meals. It's important to note that the federal government is pulling back from these areas, and the money we're voting is for the state to pick up what they were doing, but we're going to make sure that those kids and those families don't lose their meals. And so we're doing it. This sub-budget also included 68 million for early education stabilization grant program. So, doing for our youngest is something we keep doing. I want to just mention an initiative of my own that I have focused on for many years and continue to, which is safe and supportive schools. And this is to make sure to give state grants to school districts so that recognize that children learn best when all of their needs, including their behavioral health needs, are met. And so this gives 100 districts have already received the benefit of these safe and supportive school grants. And we're looking for an increase this year so we can even do more to make sure that the behavioral health needs of the children are met in our schools.
And Representative Honan.
Thank you, Cindy. So a lot of the budgetary stuff has been addressed by my colleagues, but we're always advocating for more money for childcare, which the governor has prioritized here. For kids that are a little bit older, not preschool, we advocate too for summer youth employment and work with the statewide organizations that are advocating for more program for teens. The Boys and Girls issue, which is a statewide organization that we're all involved in. We try to increase their line item by about 2 million every year. So after school, kids have a place to go and they provide meals there too. They all have nutrition programs, and we all want to encourage people to use the libraries, as Ruth was talking about earlier. So there are a whole bunch of programs throughout the area that we work on to provide positive places for our young people to go to.
Great, thank you. Okay, our next question, we'll start with Senator Cream. So on this question, let's go back to climate. Climate is very much in the news these days. The state has a new climate roadmap to help prevent further destruction to our environment. What are some ways you think the legislature can help prevent some of the worst aspects of climate change?
Well, that's where I run this committee and we have hearings on climate change. But one of the things that we haven't looked at in the past is what do we do? How do we deal with the climate change? So a bill that I have to make sure that there would be more trees, that we would plant more trees. That's an important thing to do if we're going to be talking about climate change. Finding ways to take carbon out of our climate, out of our buildings. We're not meeting our recommendations unless we take a hard look and try and decarbonize our buildings. I'm hoping that we will be looking at what we can do for mitigation in the future, because the bills, and I served on the conference committee for the last 2 climate bills, we set a roadmap, a hard roadmap for us with a lot of incentives, and we need to look at those incentives, see if they're working, and think, what are we going to do to adapt to the climate change that's in existence now? My time is up, so trying to.
Representative Balzer.
Okay, I'd like to just mention something that I accomplished this past session before looking towards the future, and that's a bill that I worked on literally for the whole 24 years that I had served in the legislature up to that point. And so that's why I'm going to brag about it. And it's called the Public Lands Preservation Act. And this bill basically protects what we call our Article 97 land. It protects our public parks. It protects our open space, clean water. It protects land from being developed. And that's an important tool in the toolbox about climate, is we need open space to absorb carbon and to prevent flooding. And this was a big accomplishment that we passed this legislation this past term, the Public Lands Preservation Act. And that was kind of the main environmental bill that I worked on as the lead sponsor for many years. I'm always a co-sponsor of what seems like 1 million climate bills filed by these guys, things like the bottle bill. And I have a long list: an act relative to pesticides, an act protecting wastewater and sewage system, an act establishing a zero carbon renovation fund, an act relative to the future of clean heat in the Commonwealth. There's a long list of bills. And I think what we've been doing each session is putting a lot of good ideas into big omnibus climate bills. And we've been making progress. I was proud to vote for last session's bill that tackled climate and expanded wind access and green transportation. And there's so much to do. And I'm confident we're going to do it.
And Representative Honan.
Thank you. I'm glad I'm going third because I like Tommy to clean up on this one. He should be batting fourth on this issue. But anyway, I co-sponsored the Clean Energy and Offshore Wind Act, so Massachusetts can hit net zero carbon emissions at some point. And as chair of housing, we traveled around, put money in bond bills for retrofitting public housing. We did some work in Watertown and in Maverick Public Housing. So they have solar panels on the top, on the roofs. So we've been encouraging municipalities and housing authorities to be more green, and they are. And we just had, I'm on a caucus that Tommy's on and everyone else here is on, the Clean Energy Caucus. And we met with Climate Chief Melissa Hoffer yesterday at the State House to hear the initiatives that are being proposed by the governor. And the governor is out front on this. Maura Healey's going to be terrific, and we will support her efforts. So this is definitely a huge issue. It's an issue in my neighborhood with the young people, particularly. We have Green Academy, which is a public school, and the kids are always coming to my office or inviting me to their school to learn what they're doing. So we'll put more money in play here and try to clean up our Commonwealth.
And batting cleanup, Representative Vitolo.
Well, I'm very proud of the fact that when Governor Baker vetoed the roadmap bill, he specifically cited language I drafted as the reason why. The legislature overrode the veto and we stuck with it. And that was the specialized stretch energy code, which Brookline adopted in January. I think, I could talk about the series of wins that I've been able to contribute to, small bits to big bills that are important, but I'd rather talk about the three areas where we're going to fight climate head on: power generation, electric vehicles, and buildings. And so for power gen, right, we need to do more support for PV. We know how to do it. It's simply getting the legislation in place. It's not just subsidies. It's also about requirements and making sure the construction's happening in the right places. We need to support transmission. We've got great wind opportunity in Maine, great hydro in Quebec. We've got to get the power here though. And that's really wonky stuff, but it's something I'll be working on. And we've got these offshore wind projects teed up. And now the developers are trying to renege and figuring out how to make sure that the agreements that they made, they held to, so that we can get that wind development built is critical. For EVs, there's three areas, right? There's electrifying mass transit, commuter rail. That actually has a relatively small impact on climate, but it's really important for a bunch of other reasons. The big impact on climate is personal vehicles. We are requiring all all vehicles purchased after 2035 to be EVs. That's already the law. We've got to support the charging. We also need to help government and fleet vehicles become electric. And with respect to buildings, right, there's two parts. There's new buildings. We should not be building any new buildings with fossil fuel heating. It's installing a time bomb. It's completely inappropriate. We need to stop that immediately. We're getting there. I don't know if we'll get there this session, but I hope so. And then we've got to retrofit 4 million buildings, and that's going to take real money, and we've got to spend it. Hopefully we'll make some progress this session on that.
Okay, the next set of questions, we start with Representative Balzer. So let's go back to housing, very big issue in Brookline and the state. Affordable housing is a significant problem, not only here, but across our Commonwealth. It's a major factor in our ability to grow economically, and our residents can and for our residents to be able to experience a healthy and fulfilling quality of life. So tell us what you think the state needs to do to help meet our housing needs. And I will note that there were particular questions on support for public housing and how the MBTA Communities Act is playing out in Brookline. All in 2 minutes.
All right, so I really wish you had asked Representative Honan to answer this first. And then I would have said whatever he says.
We can switch up the order if you like.
But yeah,
You can do it. Okay.
go for it.
We have all the power to do that.
That's
Thank
true.
you.
Representative Honan.
Thank you. So with public housing, I just spoke on there at the annual meeting yesterday, 2 days ago, but the operating subsidy is something that is very much needed. Wraparound services for the residents is something that's critically important. In Massachusetts, there's about 75 housing authorities that have additional land or capacity. And when you're building housing, the costs are obviously labor, materials, and land. So some of the housing authorities, like 75 of them, have additional land that we need to take advantage of. Some of them lack the technical expertise. So across the state, we formed some partnerships between housing authorities, some that might have more experience doing these things. So that is something that I'm a strong supporter of. In terms of Brookline, the question would be, do you have land? There are other issues for communities that are averse to 40B, that detest it, that aren't 40B compliant. Is a 40R, which would mean the community, the planning, the planners, zoning could work to find land that may be available for 40R, where the municipality has more control over the siting, because we find across Massachusetts, many communities are opposed based on siting. So I'm not sure if you have much free land here. I know in Alston, Brighton, we don't have much, but what usually happens is a 2-family home will be knocked down and a 6-family will be put in its place. So anyway, from a public housing perspective, there are budgetary requests. So last bond bill, which I sponsored, was for 1.8 billion with 600 million for the revitalization of public housing. We have not filed one yet because advocates are thinking that this is the time to go for the total amount of repairs that needs to be made, which is around 7 billion. So this needs to be worked out. There's going to be a lot of reliance on the governor, on her understanding of what the bond cap for Massachusetts is going to be. So we're going to have to work very closely with Governor Maura Healey and her A&F team to figure out how much money is available to put towards this. So my thing is always looking, is there public land available? And we have gone to labor unions at times and say, as we call it, take a haircut, like charge a little less if the housing is going to be affordable. The bond bill, like I said, the last one we did was 1.8 billion. The one before that was 1.4. There are efforts to triple that, quadruple it, and we don't know what the capacity is going to be for the whole state. So we have to be careful of that. I think 40R is an underutilized tool in Massachusetts. Many of the communities, the reps would come to me because I chaired housing for so long. They'd say, oh, this 40B project is not in a suitable location. I said, well, do you know about 40R? That's where you folks can control where it's going to be sited. And they wouldn't know anything about it. So big advocate for 40R. Maybe that could help selecting potential locations. We're seeing like shopping plazas around Massachusetts that are defunct. Those could be used for housing. Nursing homes that are going out of business. Those can be used for affordable housing as well.
Okay, let's go through this pattern. So it would be Representative Vitolo next.
All right. So when we talk about affordable housing, I think it's really important to distinguish between capital A affordable and lowercase a affordable. And by that, I mean capital A affordable subsidized housing, right? And lowercase a housing that folks who don't qualify for subsidized housing can afford, right? And they're both really important. And we tend to use the words interchangeably, but correctly and understand the context, and the public doesn't always. And so I just want to be mindful of that. I do think we're going to find more money in a bond bill for state subsidized housing. The maintenance backlog is tremendous, and it doesn't make a lot of sense to build new affordable housing if we're losing our existing affordable housing because it's maintained so poorly over so many years that it's no longer habitable. So we need to take care of what we have. We've deferred that maintenance for decades, and the housing authorities have scrambled and done the best they could to put it together. But it just needs more support. That's both federal and state. We're focused on the state side. But housing is so complicated because we all have such different experiences with housing across the Commonwealth, different housing types, different sizes, different quality. And so we come in with our own experience, and really it's like, touching an elephant in the dark. The issue is so complex because there's so many interesting details. In Brookline, we're seeing homes get additions, which means a starter home is no longer a starter home and it's much more expensive, right? That's similar to when buildings get gut renoed, and now each side of the building costs more than the building cost on its own when the two-family was purchased. The size of new housing is 50% larger than housing was 30 years ago. We're building bigger homes for everybody. It's no wonder they cost more. They're much larger, right? And these are all issues that interplay with building enough housing, with zoning and so forth. There's no question we've got to build more housing. The MBTA Communities Act will be part of that. It won't be the whole story. I'm sure there's more to come, and getting those details right and making sure they're right in very different communities is really tricky and really important.
Senator Cream.
Okay, thank you. So just a few thoughts. When we talk about public housing, what's awful is the state of public housing. And I've been working to put money into retrofitting and doing things on public housing because they are in a state of disrepair. With regard to places to put housing, I'm very proud that the Newton Armory, in a surplus building, and we should be looking at state surplus buildings, is being used for senior housing, affordable, low-income housing. So one thing to do is look at buildings that are not being used and look at and take them and do some affordable housing in them. Last week, I went to a groundbreaking in Newton for affordable senior assisted living. There's a lot of seniors out there, and there are more coming with the baby boomers, and they're looking for assisted housing. They're retired. They don't have all the money to live in the fancy housing, but they make too much money to live in the subsidized housing. So Two Life, which is a group in Brookline, is developing groundbreaking housing for seniors in Newton, and it will be affordable assisted living, which is going to be the first in the nation for middle income people. They're overlooked. They don't qualify for this. They don't qualify for that. And I'm a big supporter of doing something for middle income housing. I filed last session Brookline's real estate transfer tax. That's an important thing. There were people up at the State House last week talking about transfer tax, particularly in areas like Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard. Nantucket, where people that work in Nantucket can't afford to live there. Issues of transfer tax is something that we will be dealing with. And I think we will be dealing with some discussion on rent control. So not only do we need tons and tons of new housing, we have to look at keeping people in their homes and in the housing and making it affordable to renters as well. Lastly, I know that we need to work on the MBTA communities guidelines. I worked with them in Newton for their affordable ordinance, and I know I've been working with Representative Vitolo, looking to see about having first floor retail. I know it's a large issue in Brookline, but it is also a large issue in Newton, and we need to focus on that.
Thank you. And Representative Balzer.
Okay, thank you. I just want to acknowledge that one of the things that happens in the legislature is we do all develop areas of expertise, and then we count on one another. You know, there are 8,000 bills that get filed every session, and it's impossible to be an expert on all of them. And one thing that's great about the delegations that work so well together is we do, as we can count on each other's expertise, which I do with all these folks. I just want to make a few quick comments, having declared myself not an expert on this topic, that when Governor Healy announced that one of her approaches to housing will be to look for unused public land, I like panicked. And I thought, I just spent 24 years protecting our public land. I hope she doesn't mean public parkland. So I actually called and spoke to the lieutenant governor, who assured me they have absolutely no intention of building on public parkland. What they really do mean are like the kind of examples that have been mentioned when, there's like defunct, old hospitals or old, things that aren't being used. And I think that's a great idea. I just want to let you know I'm a co-sponsor of several of the initiatives that have been mentioned. I'm a co-sponsor of the local option real estate transfer fee. I'm also a local option on an issue that I actually have always worked for a long time on it with housing, which is about accessible accessory apartments. Back in the day when I served on the Newton Board of Aldermen along with the senator, we were there together. I led the charge for accessory apartments, and I'm still supporting those. And also I'm co-sponsor bills to make sure apartments can be also accessible for people with disabilities. So there's lots of work to be done, and this is a great delegation on this issue.
So now we will start with Representative Balzer. This is a subject you are all going to be expert on.
Okay, I hope so.
We've gotten several questions around revenue. I'm going to try to combine them into one question, and we'll let you take it from wherever you want to start. So the voters passed the Fair Share Amendment on the ballot, which will provide about $1.5 billion in new revenue for education and transportation. There are also proposals on the table from the governor, who has proposed cutting some taxes, some of which focus on parents, renters, seniors, and there's also a proposal to cut the capital gains tax and the estate tax. So looking at this whole package of new revenue coming in, tax cuts, what are your thoughts about the upcoming state budget and what this means for state revenue and tax cut proposals?
And you were starting with me?
And I,
Okay,
you know, I
that's
combined
fine.
a lot of different questions in one, so
Okay,
do what you
yeah,
can in
okay.
2 minutes on it.
Okay, I just want to say I know that the House is putting together a revenue package even as we speak, and that we're going to be debating, the House does the budget in April, and we are going to be debating a revenue package. I know that a starting point for that will be areas that were agreed to already by the House and the Senate. Last session, in our economic development bill, there were a number of tax credits given to people who need relief, people like renters, people with children. Um, and then we got waylaid because Governor Baker did his 62F. He sent back to the taxpayers, $1 billion worth of tax refunds. And so that led the House to say, wait, let's just wait and take a deep breath. But I think what's happening now is I think we're going to see a bunch of those tax credits reappear now. And the governor included some of those that were in our bill in her proposal. And I'm, supportive of those kind of tax credits that will help the most vulnerable, and was, of course, a big supporter of the Fair Share Act and don't want to do anything that undermines that.
Representative Honan.
Thank you. I think they just had their big hearing yesterday, right, on
Revenue.
revenue. Yeah. The renter's tax deduction will be fine. Absolutely anything that can help seniors would be fine. We need to be careful. The opera money will be drying up at some point. So we need to always take note of how much revenue is coming in before we do too many tax breaks. So this is an ongoing discussion, and it really depends on how we are as an economy and as a society going forward, and how our state budget is doing. Thank you.
Senator Cream. Nope, sorry. Where did we start? We started with Representative Balzer. So now we are at Representative Vitolo.
So I attended the hearing yesterday, the revenue hearing, where Governor Healy and Lieutenant Governor Driscoll essentially defended their plan to legislators from the left, the right, and the center. I was there to advocate for a bill I have, a transportation benefits bill that would allow commuters by subway and bus and bicycle to get the same transportation benefits that drivers get. I'm fortunate that much of that language is in the governor's proposal, so I think we'll get some of it for sure. And yeah, we're talking about fair share and estate tax and some of the benefits that go to folks who really need it. And 62F. I trust the judgment of my more experienced colleagues on timing. I'm sure we're going to talk about all of it. The governor's proposed a $3 million estate tax threshold where everything under $3 million is not taxed. I think it's far too much. Frankly, I'd be happy to keep it at $1 million. I understand folks are looking for $2 million. You can't spend it when you're dead, respectfully. And passing on $1 million is already quite a nice chunk of change for the next of kins. I'm hopeful that the House will bring it back to $2 million. That's where we landed last session, both House and Senate. I think that's what the legislature is going to push for. And I think $2 million is better than $3 million. I'm sure we'll fix the cliff, which is important. And I'm really hopeful we fix 62F. There's no point in bringing in more revenue for education and for transportation if it puts us over the threshold. Now we have to send it right back, right? We voted to raise taxes. We did not vote recently to send it back. Let's make sure that the legislation accounts for that and gets rid of this 62F provision, or at least severely changes it to remedy this problem where we raise money and then send it right back.
And Senator Cream.
Thank you. So I'm not sure that we need to link the fair share amendment with whatever tax breaks. I voted for the fair share amendment. I'm proud that I voted for it. I'm hoping that it brings lots and lots of money here for education and transportation. But I do think that it was interesting, and I laud the governor for saying, we're going to listen to everybody. We're going to listen to business. We're going to listen. Everybody deserves to be heard. And that's why the Revenue Committee is looking into all of these bills. And there are many, many, many of my constituents in Brookline, Newton, and Wellesley that want relief beef on the way we do the estate tax. The way we do the estate tax is if you have $1 over $1 million, everything gets taxed. It's called the cliff. Nobody really understood that that was the cliff method. We tried to fix that last year. I think we're going to fix it this year. Where we're going to land is where we think we feel we should land. I don't think we should make a decision based on what we raised or anything. We just have to look at everything very fairly. There are lots of good, important tax credits. The earned income tax credit, the child care tax credit. We need to look at them and we need to help families. So I'm not prepared to say that we'll have no credits, nothing done, but only accept the fair share. I think we're going to hear something from the Revenue Committee, both in the Senate and the House. They're going to come back with some good ideas, and repeating what Representative Balzer said, we voted in every member here at this table voted for the $2 million for the estate tax. So whether they don't like it or they do like it, it was passed in the legislature and did not pass through the governor. So we're going to do something, and I'm not sure what it will be.
Okay, our next question first goes to Representative Honan. And, oh, I see that we are very close to the end of our time here. So I don't have a next question. I think I need to give you all your closing statements. So we're going to do those in reverse order. And that means we start with Representative Vitolo, and these are 2 minutes to close.
Sure. I want to begin by thanking the Brookline Democratic Town Committee and Brookline Interactive Group. I also want to acknowledge former Brookline State Representative Jim Siegel, who snuck in the back there. Maybe he could raise his hand so we can harass him later. Look, this job is different every day. And there are big conversations at the State House about major statewide issues. There's also much smaller conversations, each of which is important. There's the local work and there's the constituent services work. And to that end, it's not yellow, it's white. My cell phone number is 617-872-8921. It's muted right now. So if you call me right now, you'll go to voicemail, but you should call me anytime. I know how to turn the ringer off when I go to bed. I return the calls. If there's anything I can do to be helpful, just call. Sometimes the answer is I can't do anything about that, but sometimes I or a colleague has some ways to make things better. And constituent service is such an important part of what we do. 617-872-8921. I'm going to keep going into the State House and working hard on progressive issues, big and small. I'm there at least 3 days a week. I'm in the district the rest of the time. You see me walking my kids to school. You see me in Brookline Village coffee houses on a regular basis, meeting with constituents. I love the job. I'm energized every day when I wake up, and I'm delighted to work with such an incredible team, both on the House and Senate side. Brookline has an incredibly experienced and quite powerful delegation, and we're going to use that for good. And so give me a call, give my colleagues a call, and we're going to keep working.
Representative Honan.
Thank you, Cindy. It's been an absolute pleasure for me to be here. I've tried to attend a number of events, an art event recently. I've been to the high school, other schools, grammar schools, to meet principals, meet school superintendent, and to further introduce myself to people. Tommy had mentioned constituent services. That's an issue that I deal with quite a bit. My phone number is 617-513-4771, and I represent precinct 13. And it's nice to see Jim Siegel here. When he was with Bonnie Frank, we did some issues pertaining to kosher meals in elderly buildings in Brookline. I have a large Hasidic population who cares deeply about kosher meals. So I would come over here. Stan Rabinovitz, who I mentioned, who passed away. Do you remember Stan Rabinovitz?
Yes.
Yeah. Stan would always bring me over to Brookline if there was an issue he thought I could be helpful in. Anyway, I was the chair of housing for 17 years, had the privilege of working all around Massachusetts with my colleagues in the legislature, dealing with housing issues. And most were affordability, not all were NIMBY type issues. It was usually affordability and how can we get something done here? Again, I'm Alston Brighton, right over the border, Brookline. I worked in Coolidge Corner Copy, which is now a comic book store in the arcade building. You know, I worked there for 5 years. I had the pleasure of meeting Neil Hefti there, who wrote the theme to Batman, who lived in Brookline. From here in Neil Hefti. We also did all the printing for the up and coming rock band called The Cars. They did all their work in there. So I met that whole band. Anyway, it's a real privilege for me to represent the precinct 13. I hope that there's some precinct 13 people here. I'm sure they're just a little above average, all of our 13 people. And that section of precinct 14. So I look forward to saying hello to you at the conclusion of this, and thank you all for coming out. Appreciate it.
Represent,
Cindy.
thank you, Representative Balzer.
Well, thank you, Cindy, and thank you, Brookline Debs, for having me here. I just want to wrap up by going back to where I started and talking about what really is my top priority. I'm very proud of the fact that I am the first psychologist to ever serve in the Massachusetts legislature. And because of that, I feel this huge responsibility to do everything I can to make sure that people who suffer from those challenges get the care that they need and deserve. And I'm so terribly disturbed by how many folks who have those illnesses get caught up instead of in our healthcare system, but in our criminal justice system. And so I don't ever miss an opportunity. In fact, today I was on the phone with the governor's policy advisors on this very topic. I take every opportunity I can to remind people that addiction is an illness and not a crime, and that's true of mental illness as well. And I'm really hoping this session I will have some more successes in terms of it really improving that very critical part of our healthcare system. What I'm very encouraged by, when I first got to the legislature, I was one of only a few people who talked about mental health. Now, lots and lots of people talk about mental health. And I hope we can make some really meaningful change. And of course, it goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway, that I encourage all my constituents in Brookline to reach out to me, and with whether it's on policy issues, which is usually what most of my constituents write about, or whether it's needing help with state agencies. I try very hard to be there for you, and I look forward to getting to know all of you much better. Thanks.
And finally, to round out this session here, Senator Cynthia Cream.
Thank you. So I have a unique comment. I grew up in Brookline. I went to the Runkle School. I went to Brookline High School. I love Brookline. I forget sometimes that I lived half my life in Brookline and half my life in Newton. And when I went to see Brookline Newton, my son playing basketball, I didn't know which side to sit on. So the last election that my mother voted for was my running for the Senate. It was last because she passed away after she lived in Brookline. So being here is very meaningful to me. My policy director, Garrett Casey, went to the Baker School, all of which I can end by saying, since we gave out a shout out to Jim Siegel, I went to the Runkle School with his brother and sister. So that's my claim to fame. But I care very much about Brookline, and I'm really honored and feeling grateful to serve the town of Brookline. And I have one big advantage. I know all the shortcuts of how to get from Newton through to Brookline. So thank you for having me, and I look forward to coming again.
Thank you all for doing this. We try to do this on an annual basis so that people can hear directly from their legislators about what is important to them and what they're working on in the State House. So thank you all for doing this. Now we're going to have a transition. So now we have kind of a surprise. We're having a transition to our election for a new state representative, something that we weren't counting on when we put this forum together, but here we are. So we're going to take a minute just to let these folks leave the podium here and bring up the candidates for the state representative seat that represents precinct 16. Correct. So we are having another primary election on the same night as the same day, election day that we're having our town elections, May 2nd. And we have the three Democratic candidates for the seat that includes precinct 16. So wonderfully, they could all join us tonight, and we are using this moment to introduce them to all of you. So our candidates here are Bill McGregor, Rob Orthman, and Celia Siegel. So welcome. We're going to start out by asking you all to introduce yourselves and why you want to serve in this position. You'll have 2 minutes for that. Time is very short for this section, but we have some questions that we've teed up, and we may go very quickly to a lightning round to see how much we can get in, and then we'll give you 2 minutes to close. So here we go. The first candidate will be Bill McGregor. 2 minutes. Introduce yourself.
Thank you for having me, Cindy, and thank you everyone for being here. My name is Bill McGregor, and as she mentioned, I'm running for state rep for the 10th Suffolk District. So I was born and raised in West Roxbury, and and my wife and I are raising our 2 girls, Eloise and Millie, about 5 or 6 blocks from where I grew up. And I have a lot of Brookline roots. I will try to keep it short, but my grandfather came from Ireland. He settled in Brookline. He was a Brookline firefighter, and he died in the line of duty in 1966. And my brother, who is named after him, is actually also on the Brookline Fire Department as a lieutenant. I actually went to his ceremony in this building here. And my father, he was a sanitation worker for the town of Brookline. And because of that, I'm a product of the Brookline Public Schools. I'm a graduate of Driscoll, Washington Square. And 1 minute already. I will skip the Brookline roots. So I think what this district deserves and wants is someone that is invested in this community. I feel that I'm someone that is already invested in here, and I think I know how hard it is to raise a family and pay a mortgage. I also think this district is looking for someone that has experience and a proven track record of getting things done. I have over 10 years of experience working in Council Matt O'Malley's office and working with the majority of this community. So I've worked with the majority of these constituents, and the priorities of this district are my priorities, and I feel like that's the reason why I'm the best candidate.
Our next candidate is Rob Orthman.
Great, thank you, and thank you for having me and everybody tonight. My name is Rob Orthman. I grew up in the West Roxbury part of this district, and I currently live in the Rosendale part of this district. I believe I'm the candidate that best blends together an understanding of the large policy issues that any state legislator is going to face, because again, you're dealing with issues not only affect this area, but the whole state, but also has a real keen understanding of how those policy areas affect the daily lives of people in this district and in each part of this district. In Rosendale, I've been a leader in housing, fighting to build more housing, and particularly fighting for more affordable housing and new projects. You can walk or drive or bike around Rosendale and parts of the Parkway, and you'll see buildings that I negotiated with, along with others, with developers to make sure that they built more income restricted units in those buildings, and also provided mitigation, whether it were bike trails or other measures to benefit the community, along with the new housing that we do need. I've been a leader in transportation, dealing with the MBTA. One of the biggest reasons I decided to run for this seat is that the MBTA is ultimately controlled by the state. The legislature controls what happens, funds it, and oversees it. I've been a leader in establishing a bike lane in Rosendale Square. For those of you that have gone there, there's about a mile stretch from Rosendale to Forest Hills that is a rapid bus lane in the morning and evening that provides tens of thousands of commuters, most of whom, the vast majority of whom, are individuals of color, that take that bus and quickly can get back and forth. That model that we fought and organized for in Rosendale is being replicated across the region and across the state. I'm on leave right now, but I work at the Department of Early Education and Care. I work to provide more available and affordable childcare to families all across the Commonwealth. I'm the father of an 8-year-old who's going to be 9 in about 2 weeks, who goes to the Boston Public Schools. I myself am a graduate of Boston Latin School. I work in early education, and I'm very passionate about that work, and I've actually done that work and understand what it requires. I'm happy to talk more about why I'm in this race tonight, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Robert Orthman, and my website is robertorthman.com. Thank you.
And Celia Siegel.
Hi, good evening. My name's Celia Siegel. I'm a candidate for state representative in this district. I grew up in Brookline. I have long roots. I went to the Runkle School also, but I decided to raise my family. I have 3 young kids in Jamaica Plain with my wife, because my kids could grow up with lots of cousins and aunts and uncles who all live nearby. I know for a lot of families, this is not an option. A lot of families are getting priced out of our neighborhoods. I've been a longtime advocate for affordable health care. I've advocated in the State House to secure $60 million in funding for critical community health programs, including things to prevent childhood asthma. As political director at NARAL Pro-Choice, I advocated successfully for a law to protect the reproductive health of women in prison. There's a lot of things our neighbors are facing right now. And I have a successful track record of getting things through the State House to protect the affordability of our communities. I've heard people at the doors who are seniors who don't feel like they can sell their house because they don't think there would be another home in their neighborhood that they could move into, because there's simply not enough housing stock in our communities. I've spoken with women, especially women who are spending their full income on childcare. These are things that we can address as the legislature, and things that are my priorities. I'm running to keep our neighborhoods affordable, housing, healthcare, childcare, and I hope I can earn your support in the election on May 2nd. For those of you, I know there may be folks watching as well. You can look up my website, alexcelia.com, and yeah.
Okay, we are going to try to get a couple questions in here. So we'll start in reverse order. So we'll start with Celia Siegel. And our first question to you is, when you talk to the voters of Precinct 16 in Brookline, what are you finding are the 2 most crucial issues to them, and how will you act on them?
Housing is critical. I hear housing every single time I speak with a voter, and it's because people want their kids to be able to live nearby, and they can't because there's not enough housing and it's not affordable, and because seniors really don't have anywhere to go. And West Roxbury has one of the largest senior populations in the whole city, and so housing is the number one issue that I hear. I helped, actually, that's how I met Cindy, build the campaign to protect the affordable housing law in 2010. And I built a broad-based coalition of housing advocacy organizations and faith-based groups and developers. It was a broad-based coalition. And so housing, those are the people I have been speaking to and understanding my housing platform. And housing would be a really big priority for me as a legislator. I'll stop there.
Okay, Rob Orthman, what are your the critical issues you are hearing in precinct 16?
Is this 2 minutes as well?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think that we're hearing the same issues across the district, quite honestly. I mean, there are differences obviously between the various neighborhoods and particularly between those in the neighborhoods of Boston and Brookline, but the commonalities are in housing, as Celia mentioned. You know, I'm the candidate that has done work as an advocate in housing for years. I'm part of an organization in Rosendale that fights to build more transit-oriented housing, more affordable housing, which I know I mentioned in my opening. And transportation is the other key issue, and they're both completely interconnected. But the MBTA, I mean, the legislature controls ultimately the funding and oversight of the MBTA. In this district, you have 4 commuter rail stations. You're just off the orange line, and obviously you have the green line here in Brookline. And I'm running in this race because I'm hearing all the time what the problems are in the MBTA. I'm not only hearing it, I'm feeling it. I'm a rider. I ride it every day to work, although I'm on leave now, and I will continue to ride it to the State House if I'm lucky enough to be elected from this district. I think residents need an advocate that is a rider. They need a rider advocate that can speak truth to power at the MBTA to answer what's going on from transparency. I was riding the orange line last year for days and it was going incredibly slow. And once in a while you notice it, but every day you're noticing what's going on. You're like, am I going crazy? There's no information, nothing anywhere. It took months to get information out of the T about the slow zones that came to light, which then shut down the orange line. We're now seeing this on the red line. We're seeing it across the system. I was stuck on the train last week trying to pick up my son at school. People across this district rely on the MBTA, and if you don't rely on it, you need a good system because otherwise you're going to see roads even more clogged. That's one of the biggest reasons I've run for this seat, and it's completely interconnected to housing. We have a housing crisis across the entire region and state. As people are being pushed out of affordability, they're moving further out. If we don't have effective commuter rail, we're not going to be able to serve those communities either. So I think as a legislator, I would look at the interconnectivity of all these issues, but those two primarily. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Bill McGregor.
I've actually met with some town meeting members as well for precinct 16, and I've gone to a couple of DCR meetings that they've had just in regards to traffic and accidents. I went to the VFW in South Street one where luckily Rep. Coppinger and Senator Rush got some funding in order to make changes for that street to make it safer. They added crosswalks. I know that's something important to the constituents in precinct 16. Also, I do know that there's some trees that are dying in precinct 16, and that's due to gas leaks. One thing that I worked on in Councilor Malley's office was filing legislation to fill pipelines that have gas leaks. So when a road was open, we will try and fill those. Unfortunately, the gas companies are suing because state supersedes city law. So if I am elected, I would work on trying to fulfill that goal that we tried to do in the city. Another one that I heard is, just people want to make sure about reproductive rights. I'm someone that would support someone coming from another state to come here to to get an abortion, or I think the women have the right to choose.
Okay, now, because we have limited time, we are going straight to the lightning round. So this is how this is going to work. We're going to go through lots of different issues. You'll get 30-second responses. Gives you about a sentence on each of them, I think, maybe 2 if you're lucky. But I know that there are a lot of issues that people want to hear about. So here we go. Timekeeper, you on it? 30-second responses. All right. All right, we're gonna put everybody through their paces here. So we will start with, I think we're starting again with, let's start with Rob Orthman. I don't think you got to start one yet. Okay, and we're gonna keep going around the circle. All right. First issue, protecting fair share amendment revenues.
I think it's absolutely critical as a legislator that we protect that revenue. The voters made it clear that they want the revenue to go to primarily transportation and housing initiatives. And I'm concerned about the governor's tax plan to the extent that what could happen is you could simply have money going to fair share revenue, but losing that on the backside with the capital gains tax and with the estate tax. I'm open to tax relief. That's not the issue, but the way it's being talked about could really diminish and be a backdoor way to basically effectively de facto eliminate that fair share revenue. And I don't believe that's what the voters chose. I mean, I voted yes and I campaigned for it, and I would definitely fight that as a legislator.
Okay, Celia Siegel.
Yeah, so I believe that the fair share revenue should be additive and should not be a substitute for other revenue that we have as in the state. And yes, I think some of the capital gains tax and the estate tax changes are inappropriate in this case, and that the especially the estate tax, maybe we can think about ways to reduce that cliff on in terms of taxation. But I do think raising it to 3 million, as the governor proposed, is too high, and we shouldn't do it.
And Bill McGregor.
So I'm in support of the fair share, and I with what the governor's come up with, the 3 million, I think that's a great start, and something that we should at least, start with.
Okay, next subject, protecting access to abortion. So, Rob Orthman.
Sure. Well, in light of the Dobbs decision overturning Roe, I mean, obviously we have strong abortion rights in Massachusetts. I think we need to strengthen them. We need to make sure that we pass the act that Governor Baker vetoed last year, now that we have a Democratic governor and a Democratic legislator, to further strengthen that. I also think we need to be very welcoming to individuals coming from other states that need abortion care, not only allowing them to come in, but actually providing for them while we're here, making sure they have housing, making sure they have childcare if necessary, making sure we set up those networks. And I'm willing to do as a legislator to actually set up community networks to make sure individuals that are pregnant have that access and care here.
Celia Siegel.
I spent part of my career working as political director at NARAL, Pro-Choice Massachusetts. And as part of that, I worked very deeply on a lot of the issues about reproductive health access and abortion access. And a lot of the issues come down to insurance and whether you have copays that are prohibitive to accessing abortion. And so I would be a strong advocate as a healthcare advocate in my whole career for making sure that people have access to health insurance that covers abortion and the full range of reproductive health care. I also would be an advocate for protecting doctors. Many doctors experience harassment every single day if they provide abortion. And a lot of doctors don't advertise that they prescribe abortion medication because they're scared of that harassment. And so I think we need really strong protections for our doctors who are providing this critical care.
Bill McGregor.
I think the three of us are in agreement here, and I would actually also advocate for healthcare insurance and for abortion access for anyone in Massachusetts, or anyone that's coming from out of state in order to get access. And I actually think that's a great idea to protect the doctors. So I think that's something that's great.
Next topic, gun violence prevention laws. Let's start again with Rob Orthman.
Sure. Well, in the wake of the shooting that just happened in Nashville, we obviously have an absolute crisis in this country. Massachusetts has strong gun laws, but we can go further. I think we need, and I know there's some conversation happening in the legislature now on that. I would be a strong advocate of doing everything we can to keep assault rifles, weapons out of the hands of people in this state that shouldn't have them. I think we should go as far as we possibly can under current constitutional law and jurisprudence to do that. And I'll be a very strong advocate of that and supporting the Attorney General as well, since she's spoken up very clearly about enforcing the laws we have and being much more of a hawk on these illegal gun shows, these illegal gun sales, which are happening, and these guns coming into this state in particular from places like New Hampshire.
Celia Siegel.
Yes, I agree with what Rob said. One of the things I used to work on was with domestic violence shelters was preventing people who had a record of committing domestic violence from accessing guns and being able to purchase guns. And so I think that's a part of the conversation that we don't talk about. There's so much violence in our community and in our homes. And I think we need to make sure that people who are experiencing violence in their homes aren't threatened by people who have access to guns. And so I think that's a big part of the conversation.
And Bill McGregor.
I mean, I think the three of us are all in agreement. I mean, we're all parents, you know, well, my kids are in daycare, but yeah, I mean, you know, there shouldn't be violence at schools or anywhere really. I mean, I would hope that we can get as strict as possible with gun laws. And yeah, as a parent, I would never want a gun personally in my house. So I'd be an advocate for gun laws.
Okay, next topic, Bill McGregor, same day voter registration.
That's me.
Oh, sorry, Rob Orthman. I keep going around the circle here. Yep, so Rob Orthman.
Okay.
Same day voter registration.
No problem. Well, I'm strongly in support of same day voter registration. I think it's really a problem that we live in the cradle of liberty and democracy of this country, yet we have some of the most, regressive voting habits and voting practices. We need same day registration. We need the ability to make access to voting much easier. I think we need to lead on that. I think the legislature can lead on those issues, and I would be a strong advocate of that, along with further transparency in general in terms of committee votes being public, as well as just opening up to what's going on. But access to the ballot is crucial. And I think we can't have a situation where people are moving places and then they can't register to vote. It's particularly problematic for college students and renters.
Celia Siegel.
Yeah, I support that as well. Same day registration. It's how I first registered to vote as an 18-year-old in Minnesota at the time as a college student. And I think we need to eliminate as many barriers to voting as possible, even not just for young people and college students, but people who have moved recently. I support same day registration.
And Bill McGregor.
I mean, we're all in agreement here. One thing that I worked on when I was in the city was during the pandemic to get vote by mail applications out. Obviously, just due to safety reasons. So that was one thing that we worked on. Obviously, it got out there for everywhere, and it's something that I was proud of. And I think we just need to make sure voter registration, voter access is as available as possible. So yes, I'm in favor of same day voter registration.
Okay, let's switch up our order now. Let's mix it up a little. So now this time we'll start with Celia Siegel. Okay, reducing the price of prescription drugs for chronic healthcare conditions.
Well, thank you for asking that question. This is what I spend every single day doing in my role for the state. I help our Medicaid negotiate with pharmaceutical companies, and I've spent the last 5 years working to run transparent processes that incorporate stakeholder input about the fair price of prescription drugs. So I would be, this is my policy expertise, and I would be an advocate for controlling the cost of healthcare and prescription drugs. There are some people that have to spend, deductibles can go up to $18,000 now for a family. There are some people who have to spend their whole deductible just to access basic prescriptions to treat their cancer pain. And that to me is unacceptable. I think we need to, I'll let stop.
And we'll go to Bill McGregor next.
Absolutely, we need to make sure we can keep prescription prices as low as possible. I see my father fighting, with his insurance. He's on a fixed income. I understand how hard it is to, well, not personally, but my father does, how hard it is to pay for prescriptions and making sure that the insurance covers it. So I would absolutely be an advocate for that.
Rob.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I agree. My 93-year-old grandmother is still with us, thankfully. And, I've thought about driving up to Canada or having some of the bus trips up to Canada to buy prescription drugs. But I think it speaks to something even bigger, which is that in Massachusetts, we've led the way on health insurance access. And I think we should be proud of that. But I think we need to start looking at going further and providing essentially the equivalent of a state Medicare for all program that would not solve all of these problems, but would further get 100% insurance, but also start bringing down costs. We'd have the ability to bulk, negotiate and things of that nature. No state in the country has gone that far yet. A couple have thought about it. And I think if Massachusetts can't, then who else can,
Okay, let's go another round with Celia going first again. And this time, let's talk about the Common Start framework for early childhood education.
So I'm very excited about the Common Start framework. I had 3 young kids. All 3 of them were in preschool last year at the same time. And thank God that BPS has near universal pre-K now, because now my oldest son is in pre-K. The fact that I think pre-K should be universal. I think we need to provide preschool for more children. And I think we need to train a whole generation of small business leaders who can build their own home care businesses, because this is a big part of our local economies. And oftentimes home care is more culturally appropriate within communities.
And let's go to Bill next.
I mean, I would absolutely be supportive of this. In regards to like universal pre-K, I know they've done that in Springfield already, and I feel like Boston, Brookline should I know Boston's getting close to it, but I want to get to having that established as much as possible.
And Bill, I'm sorry, and Rob, going around.
Fine. That's
Sorry.
fine. Thank you. One of the reasons I got in this race is because I work in early childhood education now, and I'm on leave from the Department of Early Education and Care to run for this seat. The Common Start legislation is crucial. We're at an absolute turbocharged crisis in the childcare and educator industry that was already bad before the pandemic and has been made even worse. We've seen thousands of providers close and not reopen. We don't have enough money to fund them. And we have parents like myself, when my son was a little younger, unable to find childcare. We have childcare providers that are getting paid next to nothing in the industry, and we need to do much more. Common Start is absolutely crucial, and it's one of the biggest reasons I decided to run in this race, is to fight for that bill.
Okay, now we will do a quick round with Bill going first. So, question to you is no cost calls for people in prisons and jails.
So yes, I am supportive of that. I think for people to be able to call their loved ones that are incarcerated is important, and I would be supportive of that bill.
And then we'll go to Rob.
I do support that, and I'd hope to see it actually go through this year. Now, it's something I would fight and advocate for. I think it speaks to the larger issue of mass incarceration, which, despite our liberal reputation in Massachusetts, we still have far too many individuals incarcerated in this state. So I think at bare minimum, we should make phone calls available for inmates so they can call family and loved ones and continue to hold on to those social connections that are so valuable as folks come out of prison. But at the bigger issue is that we have mass incarceration. We need to start expunging convictions for marijuana, which is now legal in this state. And we need to take a serious look at mandatory minimums as well, and stop incarcerating people for relatively minor offenses.
And Celia.
Yes, I think calls shouldn't be held as a punitive measure for people who are incarcerated. I think the governor included no cost calls, I believe, in her budget, and I support that as well. I think there's a lot of things in the criminal justice system that should be reformed, including making sure there's a petitions process for nonviolent crimes to expunge your criminal record after a period of time, and that's something that I would work on as a legislator.
And the last one in this round, again, starting with Bill, enacting the local option transfer tax to increase funding for affordable housing.
Yes, I am supportive of the transfer tax for affordable housing. We are in critical need of affordable housing, and we're in critical need of housing in general. Massachusetts is the 11th worst state in underproduction, where last year I think we produced 108,000 under units, under the number of units that we needed to keep up pace. So yes, I would.
Rob.
Sure. I definitely support that transfer tax, and I think that we have to use every tool in the toolbox available to bring down costs and protect tenants. I mean, I've worked as a community advocate for years to bring more housing to the Parkway community, particularly fighting for more income restricted and affordable housing. This is one measure of many. There's also the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act that would help prevent displacement when a building is sold, and I support that. I also support turbocharging production. The reality is we don't have enough homes just across the board anywhere, and every community has to do its part. And I believe that we need to look at that statewide. But I'd certainly support at minimum the Tenant Purchase Act as well as the local transfer.
And Celia.
And I would support the local transfer tax as well. I think we got a lot of funding from ARPA to develop new affordable housing, and that funding is coming to an end. And we need to make sure that we generate new funding to develop affordable housing. We also can sustain some of the funding that we've committed to as a state in the budget for developing affordable housing and for first-time home buyer programs for low and moderate income home buyers. And so I support new funding sources. I support adding funding in the budget that's now sunsetting because we're losing ARPA funds. And I support the transfer tax as part of that.
And with that, we have reached time for our closings. So we'll do them in the reverse order of how we started, which means that Celia Siegel goes first. And for this, I believe you have 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Yes.
Sure. So I was born and raised in Brookline. I have a lot of family here. I see precinct 6. I know precinct 16 is a small part of the district, but it's a really important part of the district for me. I grew up going there every weekend to some of my closest friends' houses, and my aunt was worked at Baker School. So precinct 16 is a really important part of the district to me, and I would hold it close, near and dear to me. I've been a longtime advocate for affordable healthcare, affordable prescription drugs, and reproductive rights. And I've used that advocacy to pass critical legislation through the State House. I think I've learned how to navigate the State House, but I think that the role of a legislator isn't just to work within the State House, but to work in coalition with statewide organizations and groups. If we want to pass rent stabilization in Boston, we need to convince legislators in Newton and in Fitchburg and in Springfield that it's a good idea. And I've done this work in coalition with statewide advocacy organizations, and I could bring that in my advocacy as a legislator for the districts representing West Roxbury and also Brookline and Jamaica Plain, where I live in Roslindale.
And then Rob Orthman.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the opportunity to be here, and to the Brookline Democrats, and for everyone that stayed. I know it's getting a little late. If I leave people with anything, I would say that I'm the candidate in this race that understands the big picture policy that really is going on in the legislature and at the larger state level, but really understands on a very keen level how it affects the daily lives of individuals in this district. The MBTA is a huge issue, and we're all facing it all the time. Whether you use it or not, we are all suffering from the state of this system. It's not going to be fixed overnight, but we need legislators that are going to shine transparency on what's going on in the short term, and long term look to stabilize that. I've done that work as a community advocate, and I'll bring that to the legislature if I'm lucky enough to be elected. On housing, I've talked tonight about how I've been an advocate for affordable housing. I can point to projects that have been built that I organized with and worked on, working with developers when necessary and pushing back against developers when necessary. I work right now in early education and care. I'm a parent. I've dealt with it on a personal level, and I've seen what's happened professionally, and the pandemic's made it much worse. I support the Common Start legislation, and I'll bring that family-focused early child education lens to the State House if I'm elected. One other thing I didn't mention is I have a keen understanding of constituent services. I worked for a former Boston City Councilor, John Tobin, for almost 4 years. I helped do the basic things that people rely on in city government or town government, getting potholes filled, trees trimmed, things of that. As a state legislature, you have a role in that on our state parkways, our state roads, and our state lands. And you're also at large or an advocate in general for folks and connecting them to navigate through state bureaucracy. I've done that work, and I know how to do that work. If I'm lucky enough to be elected from this community, I will be an advocate for folks in this community. I will help navigate and find resources in state government, and I will be a passionate advocate for the big policy issues that affect the daily lives of everybody in this district and in this town and community. And again, thank you for the opportunity to be here. It's robertorthman.com, Robert, ORTHMAN.com. Thank you so much.
And finally, Bill McGregor.
Well, I just want to thank you guys for inviting us and having me, and I appreciate everyone staying so late or watching at home. So the 16th precinct is also important to me. I know there's a lot of families that send their kids to Baker School. My niece just graduated from there. She's a 9th grader at the high school. My nephew's at Baker School now. My sister-in-law is a teacher at Runkle. I've just grown up, born and raised over there as well. No, I'm sorry, I wasn't born and raised, but it's been a part of my life. And if elected, my priorities, mental health. I want to make sure that we take care of mothers with postpartum depression. I feel like that is something that's key. Mental health for students in high school. I think there should be a room for them to be able to check on their emotional well-being. I also think we need to expand licensing for telehealth from state to state. Pathways to home ownership. I'm working as a loan officer. I see how hard it is for people to buy homes right now, and I want to be able to help them as much as possible. As a state legislator, we need to fund them and help them that way. We need to incentivize developers to build starter homes. The 10th district is very hard, very expensive to afford, and families can't do it. Speaking from someone that has a family, it's very hard to afford. So, and then early childhood education is very important to me. I am paying over $50,000 for 2 kids to go to daycare, and neither one are actually going full time. And my wife, she's a ER nurse, and we're trying to struggle figuring it out. She'll work till 2 a.m. And, sometimes I have to go meet a constituent at 7 a.m. and I feel bad waking her up. After May 2nd, I don't think I'm gonna be able to do that anymore. But yes, so hopefully you consider me. My website is billmcgregor.org.
Okay, thank you all very much. Thank you to our legislators who joined us, to our candidates who joined us, and to Brookline Interactive Group for covering this tonight. And of course, remember, Election Day is Tuesday, May 2nd. You can vote from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. in person, and you can also vote early. Go to the town clerk's website to find out how you can vote, brooklinema.gov/town clerk. Thank you all and good night.